Hello everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Today I'd like to talk about motorcycle insurance. I got to thinking about this topic when my oldest kids, they're in their early 20s, was asking me about the ins and outs of car insurance, but these topics obviously apply to motorcycle insurance. So I want to go through things to consider in buying motorcycle insurance, how to save money on motorcycle insurance, types of coverages you may or may not want to get, and some of the other things that may not be apparent to you unless you've been around for many decades. And I know many of you will recognize these points. So if you have thoughts of your own, please let me know in the comments section. So first of all, we all know motorcycle insurance can be very expensive, particularly if you're a younger rider. Uh, so what are some of the factors that influence the cost of motorcycle insurance? First of all, it's your age, your gender, although that's not the case in every state. In some states, insurance companies are prohibited from using gender as part of the underwriting decision-making process or to calculate premiums. Where you live, specifically your zip code. If you're talking about a car, how many miles you drive each year, although the research I've done indicates that that's really not a factor for motorcycle insurance. Your driving record, of course, what you ride. Typically higher displacement bikes have higher premiums. Certain models that have a history of high theft rates or crash rates will have higher premiums. Your credit score will influence how much money you pay for insurance. Some may think that's kind of odd, but years ago, not long after Hurricane Katrina went through New Orleans, I noticed that there was this part of town where there was at least a dozen burned out cars. And I was asking a local, what's the deal with all these burned out cars? He said, well, what happens is people get behind on their car payment and they'll go drop the car, burn it, go back home and report the car as stolen, which of course is fraud, felony fraud actually. So don't recommend that at all. But insurance companies recognize that in general, for a lot of reasons, people with poor credit may end up making more claims for one reason or another. So there are a variety of types and limits of coverage that you'll want to go through. Obviously, you have the state minimum coverages. When you're young, maybe the minimum coverages would be enough for you. As you get older and you accumulate assets, getting higher limits than the state mandated minimums is probably warranted. So let's just hit a few of these topics. I've put a link to an article by Forbes that goes into details on insurance if you want to take a deeper dive on it. But I think one of the things you want to think about is, do you actually need full coverage? By law, you have to have liability coverage on any vehicle that you operate on public roads. Typically, you're going to have to get full coverage if you have a loan on the motorcycle, or it's just a newer, nicer, or more expensive motorcycle. Would I get full coverage on a motorcycle that only cost me $3,000? Absolutely not. I would just get the liability coverage. So that's the big thing right there, to figure out if you need liability only or you need to spring for the full coverage policy. Then you need to look at your deductibles. Especially if I'm just starting out and I'm trying to do everything I can to save money on premiums, I'm going to go with a higher deductible, at least $1,000 deductible, so that if you make a claim, you'll have to pay the first $1,000 before the insurance company will pay anything. That's a good way to save some money. Of course, you don't want to get into a situation where you have a deductible that's so high that you couldn't afford to make the claim. Earlier, I mentioned that your driving record is certainly going to affect your premium. Obviously, you'll have to let the insurance company know if you've had any tickets and accidents. They're going to do a check on it anyway. If they find out that you've misrepresented anything, they may just not offer you insurance at all. But let's say you've got a clean record. You want to keep it that way. If you find yourself getting a speeding ticket, most jurisdictions offer some type of diversion where essentially you pay twice the fine and the agency will not report the ticket to other agencies. So in other cases, it may be more cost effective to pay for an attorney to help mitigate the impacts of a traffic ticket or to fight it than it would be to pay for the increase in insurance premiums. Particularly if you're a young male riding a sport bike, getting a couple tickets can make the difference between having affordable insurance or not. You certainly want to shop around. Insurance is becoming more and more competitive and easy to shop for with the ability to get quotes online. You might be able to benefit from what they call multi-line discounts. So if you have more than one policy, that would factor in. Most insurance companies will give you at least a 10% discount if you've recently completed an MSF writing course. I think it's just for marketing purposes, but also offer other discounts. For example, Hog membership will get you a discount with most insurance companies. If you auto pay monthly instead of pay by statement, usually you'll get additional savings there. So some of the other things that can impact your premium would be, are you going to insure a passenger? If I were young, riding a sport bike and paying through the nose for insurance, I'd have to say no to passengers. But you'll have to make sure you do have that coverage if in fact you do have passengers. In my case, the only passengers I have on my bikes are family members, so I waive the medical coverage because we all have our own health insurance under my policy. So it'd be a duplication of insurance to add that to the policy. Keep in mind, if you are in an accident, most insurance companies on the comprehensive plans will also insure your motorcycle gear. So if you get abrasions or cuts or damage to a helmet, they'll replace that. I'd certainly contact your insurance agent before you actually buy a bike that you're thinking about buying. You might find that the insurance is prohibitively expensive. A lot of times it just doesn't make any sense. A few years ago, I got an FC09. It was a 2014, the first year that came out, and the insurance was ridiculously cheap. Of course, I'm an older rider, and I thought, but even so, I mean, this is an inline triple. It's basically a hooligan bike if you want to ride it that way. And over the next few years, the premiums on that bike went way up as a number of people were cracking up on them. The other thing you got to watch out for is make sure you don't have exclusions on your policy that is going to leave you with a gap in coverage. Not all motorcycle insurance coverage provides protection from damage if you're towing a motorcycle, as an example. Understand the difference between actual value or replacement policies. Most of the time now you're just going to get actual value or the market value of the bike. The replacement value, I think they're kind of going away from that these days, so just be on the lookout for that. Also, too, you've got antique coverage, so it is possible, on paper, a 1903 Indians probably worth next to nothing, but everyone knows the market value for those is probably over 100 grand. So you can get, in specific cases, actual value policies for special cases like that. So let me know what you think in the comments section. From what I understand, the national average for insurance is around $1,000 a year. California's the highest, around $1,300 a year. Other places about half that. That was certainly my experience when I moved from Nebraska back in the 80s. To a few years, my insurance premiums instantly doubled. So I was doing everything I could to save money. Now on motorcycles, some companies will offer seasonal discounts, or if you have a situation where you can't really ride, or you don't ride during the winter months, where I live, I actually kind of get a freebie. They figure you're going to ride about 9 months out of the year, so they calculate the premium based on riding 9 months. I'm still covered if something happens in those other months, but that's how they calculate the premium. But I remember years ago, I'd actually have a layoff policy where I just didn't have anything but the bare minimum insurance during the winter months. So again, there's a lot of options to look for. Be sure to shop around. Remember, insurance companies and agents aren't your friend, but they can be a good resource. And just be careful with what you're shopping for and make sure you know what you're getting. Thanks very much, everyone.